The sun was bleeding into the horizon when Josephine Lambert finally collapsed. Blood streaked her side, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. She had been running for 3 days across the unforgiving Arizona desert, hiding among rocks and brush, too afraid to rest for more than a few stolen moments. Her fine blue dress hung in tatters, her once neat hair matted with dust and blood. Ahead stood a barn, weathered, gray, and sturdy against the twilight. It looked like salvation. But Josephine didn't make it to the door. She stumbled the last few steps and fell, her body crumpling into the dirt as darkness claimed her. Quinn Thornton had been alone for 5 long years. His ranch stretched wide across the desert valley, built by his own sweat and stubborn will. At 30, he had known hunger, drought, and heartbreak, but loneliness had become the hardest battle of all. That evening, he was returning from the far pasture when he saw something strange, a splash of color at his barn door that didn't belong. At first, he thought it was an animal or a trick of the dying light. But as he came closer, rifle in hand, he saw it was a woman, broken, bloodied, and barely breathing. "Ma'am?" His voice was cautious but kind. When she didn't move, he knelt beside her. Her pulse was weak, her skin cold. "Hold on now," he murmured, lifting her into his arms. She was light as air, and her head rested against his chest as he carried her toward his cabin. "You're safe now. I've got you." Inside the small house, Quinn laid her gently on his bed. He worked quickly, heating water, gathering what little medicine he had, and cleaning the wound at her side. It was deep. A knife cut, not a bullet. Whoever had done this hadn't wanted her to die quickly. He muttered a quiet curse. The world was cruel to the helpless, especially out here in 1875 Arizona territory. He remembered the herbs an old Apache woman had once taught him to use for infection. He mixed a poultice and pressed it carefully against her wound before wrapping it with clean cloth. Then he sat beside her, watching her shallow breaths, wondering who she was and what kind of hell she had come from. When dawn finally broke, Josephine stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open to reveal eyes the color of a summer sky. Confused and frightened, she tried to sit up but fell back with a sharp cry of pain. "Easy," Quinn said softly. "You're safe. You're at my ranch." Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse and dry. "Name's Quinn Thornton." He offered her a cup of water. "Found you by my barn last night. You've been hurt bad." She drank greedily, then whispered, I'm Josephine Lambert." Her gaze darted around the small cabin. The simple furniture, the wood stove, the smell of coffee and smoke. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You didn't," Quinn replied. "You needed help. That's enough reason for me." Her eyes filled with tears as memories returned. Gunfire, screaming, the stagecoach overturning, the smell of smoke and blood. "They killed everyone," she whispered. "The driver, the passengers, all of them." Quinn frowned. "Bandits?" She nodded weakly. "The stage from Tucson to Prescott. They stopped us 3 days ago. I hid under the wreck when they started shooting. I just ran after they left." Quote. Quinn did the math in his head. "That's near 40 miles. You've been on foot all that time?" "I had to," she said. "They were looking for something. Something they thought was on the stage. When they didn't find it, they said they'd hunt down anyone who escaped." Quinn's jaw tightened. "Well, they won't find you here." She wanted to warn him, to tell him she'd only brought danger to his door, but exhaustion dragged her under again. Over the next few days, Josephine drifted between fevered dreams and brief moments of awareness. Each time she opened her eyes, Quinn was there, changing her bandages, offering water, or just sitting quietly by her side. His presence was steady, calming, like the earth itself. She had never met a man so gentle with his strength. By the 4th morning, the fever broke. Sunlight streamed through the small window, and Josephine woke to find herself alone in the tidy cabin. A dress hung neatly over a chair, clearly worn but freshly washed. With slow, trembling hands, she sat up and reached for it. The wound at her side ached but no longer bled. She dressed with effort, then followed the smell of coffee and cinnamon to the main room. Quinn stood by the stove, his broad shoulders outlined against the morning light. When he turned and saw her, his surprise quickly softened into concern. "You should be resting," he said. "I've rested enough," Josephine replied. "I've already taken too much of your kindness." He gave a small smile. "Kindness don't cost me anything, Miss Lambert. Sit, breakfast's ready." She obeyed, too weak to argue. On the table sat a plate of Johnny cakes and a pot of coffee. As she ate, she noticed the details of the room: a shelf of well-worn books, a rocking chair draped with a patchwork quilt, a small vase of wildflowers. It was a simple home, but it spoke of care. "Where did this dress come from?" she asked quietly. Quinn hesitated, then said, "It was my sister's. She lived here after her husband died, moved back east 2 years ago." Josephine touched the fabric gently. "Thank you for saving me. I would have died out there." Quote. He shrugged, though his eyes softened. Anyone would have done the same. She looked at him steadily. No, not everyone would have. Their eyes met for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Gratitude, maybe, or the first spark of something neither dared name. When she was stronger, Josephine told him her story, how she'd been a schoolteacher in Tucson, how she'd lost her parents young, how she'd been heading to Prescott to stay with her cousin after the school closed. "And you?" she asked when she finished. "Have you always been a rancher?" "Not always," he said. "Was a cavalry scout for a while. Drove cattle up from Texas before I bought this land." He looked around the cabin. "Ain't much, but it's mine. 200 head of cattle, 3 horses, and a creek that hasn't run dry yet." "It's more than most have," Josephine said softly. "And it feels safe." For the first time in years, Quinn felt a warmth he couldn't quite explain. "You can stay as long as you need," he said, "till you're strong enough to travel again." Quote. Josephine wanted to argue, but deep down, she didn't want to leave. For the first time since the massacre, she felt safe. And perhaps, just perhaps, she was beginning to feel something more. That afternoon, as she hung freshly washed clothes on the line, a strange unease stirred within her. The land was quiet. Too quiet. She shaded her eyes against the sun and froze. In the distance, a cloud of dust was rising. Riders. Coming fast. Her heart pounded. She turned and ran toward the pasture where Quinn was working, shouting his name. The danger she had feared was finally catching up to her. Josephine's breath came in, short, panicked gasps as she ran across the open pasture. "Riders!" she shouted, waving her arms. "Coming fast from the south." Quinn looked up from where he was checking a fence post, instantly alert, his expression hardened. "Get to the house," he ordered, already moving toward his horse. "My rifle's above the door. If I don't come back in 5 minutes, take the mare and follow the creek north. There's a settlement 20 miles up." Quote, "I'm not leaving you," Josephine protested, clutching her side. But Quinn was already striding toward the barn, his hand on the revolver at his hip. "Do as I say," he called back, his voice sharp with urgency. "Now!" Josephine obeyed, her heart pounding. She reached the house and ducked behind the porch post, watching as 5 riders approached from the southern ridge. They slowed near the barn, dust swirling around them. The man in front wore a red bandana over his throat and carried himself with an air of command. Josephine's stomach turned. She knew that face. He was the same man who'd led the stagecoach attack. "Afternoon," Quinn called out from the porch, his tone calm and measured. "Something I can help you with?" The leader's eyes flicked across the property. "We're looking for someone," he said. "A woman, early 20s, dark hair, blue eyes. Might be hurt. You seen anyone like that?" Quinn's face gave nothing away. "Can't say that I have. Been busy tending cattle. Don't get many visitors out this way." The man's gaze shifted toward the clothesline. Josephine's heart nearly stopped. Her torn dress hung there among Quinn's shirts, swaying in the wind. "You do your own laundry, rancher?" he asked, suspicion sharpening his tone. Quinn didn't blink. "Man's got to stay clean. Doesn't take much work to wash a few things." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we take a look around?" I do mind, Quinn replied evenly. This is private property. If your employer's got business here, he can take it up with the marshal in Prescott. The tension thickened. The riders shifted uneasily in their saddles. Finally, the leader gave a cold smile. No need to get unfriendly. Just trying to earn an honest dollar. His voice dripped with false charm. If you happen to see her, there's a $50 reward, alive or dead. I'll keep that in mind, Quinn said quietly. The man's grin faded. He studied Quinn for a moment, then jerked his chin toward his men. Let's ride. They turned their horses and rode off, leaving behind only the sound of hooves and settling dust. Josephine waited until they were distant specks before stepping out. They'll be back, she said, her voice trembling. Quinn nodded grimly. Yes, but not tonight. He studied her face. What did you steal? Nothing, Josephine's voice broke. I was just a passenger. I had nothing of value, only my mother's locket and a few dollars. Quinn believed her, but his expression stayed tense. They think you've got something, or know where it is. Josephine frowned, thinking hard. There was a man on the stage, well-dressed, nervous. He had a leather satchel he guarded closely. When the shooting started, he hid it under the seat before they killed him. I never saw it again. Quinn's jaw tightened. Then that's what they're after, and they think you took it. I didn't, she cried. I ran as soon as I could. I didn't take anything. I believe you, Quinn said, his voice steady, but believing won't stop them from coming back. We'll have to be ready. He looked toward the horizon where the riders had disappeared, then back at Josephine. You should leave tomorrow. I'll take you to Prescott myself. Her heart ached at his words. The thought of leaving this quiet, safe place, and him, filled her with a sadness deeper than she expected. But she nodded. You've already done too much for me. Quinn shook his head. You're not a burden. His eyes softened. You've made this place feel alive again. The silence that followed said everything neither dared speak. That night, they sat together on the porch. The Arizona sky stretched endless above them, stars bright as fireflies. The air was cool, carrying the scent of mesquite and rain. Josephine folded her hands in her lap, feeling the quiet beat of her heart match the rhythm of the crickets. What will you do when you get to Prescott? Quinn asked, breaking the silence. Stay with my cousin, she said. Maybe find a teaching position again. Her voice sounded unsure, even to her own ears. And you? What will you do when you come back here? He looked out at the dark horizon. Same as always. Ranch work. Finish the new barn. Start that orchard I've been planning. She smiled faintly. You don't mind the quiet? I used to think I liked it, Quinn said. Then you showed up. Josephine looked down, her cheeks warming. Maybe the quiet just needed a little company. He turned toward her, and for a long moment neither spoke. Then he said softly, You've been through hell, Josephine Lambert. But you're strong, stronger than you know. And you're kinder than any man I've ever met, Quinn Thornton. The air between them seemed to hum with something unspoken. Quinn's hand twitched, as though he wanted to reach for hers. But he didn't. Instead, he stood. We leave at sunrise, he said quietly. Get some rest. But Josephine couldn't sleep. As she lay awake in the small room, listening to the steady sound of the wind, her mind raced with thoughts of the journey ahead and the man who had risked everything for her. When morning came, Quinn had the horses ready before the sun broke the horizon. You ride the mare, he said. She's steady and gentle. My sister's old horse. They rode out in silence, side by side across the pale desert. The land stretched endlessly before them, gold and red in the morning light. By midday, they stopped near a creek to rest the horses. Josephine removed her bonnet, letting the wind cool her face. How much farther to the nearest town? 15 miles, Quinn said, pouring water into his hand for the mare to drink. Small settlement called Juniper Creek. Decent people there. They could use a teacher. Josephine's eyes met his. You mean I could stay there? Maybe, Quinn said, his voice low. If you wanted to. She studied him, searching his face for meaning. Why did you really decide to take me yourself, Quinn? You could have sent someone from town. He hesitated, then said quietly, because I wasn't ready to say goodbye. The words hung in the air between them, soft and sure. Josephine's throat tightened. She reached out, her hand brushing his. I wasn't ready either. Quinn's fingers closed around hers, rough and warm. You barely know me, he murmured. Maybe, she whispered, but I know enough to trust you. He leaned closer, his voice a low rumble. Josephine. Her name on his lips sent a shiver through her. Their eyes met, and then he kissed her, gently at first, then deeper, with all the longing of two souls who had found each other in a world that seldom offered second chances. When they finally pulled apart, Josephine's eyes shone with tears she didn't bother to hide. Quinn rested his forehead against hers. We'll get you safe. After that, she finished softly, we'll see what the future brings. Neither of them knew that danger was still riding behind them, closer than they imagined. The sun was high when Quinn and Josephine finally reached the edge of Juniper Creek. The small settlement sat nestled in a valley surrounded by low hills, smoke rising gently from chimneys, and the faint sound of laughter drifting on the wind. It looked peaceful, like a place where the world might start over. Quinn helped Josephine dismount. Welcome to Juniper Creek, he said softly. Let's get you a meal and a place to rest. They left their horses at the livery and walked toward the main street. People greeted Quinn warmly. He was well known here. At the general store, a man with a thick white beard stepped out, his grin spreading wide. Well, if it ain't Quinn Thornton. Been months since we've seen you. And who's the lady? Samuel Miller, Quinn said, shaking his hand. This is Miss Josephine Lambert. She's come a long way. Samuel tipped his hat politely. Welcome, Miss Lambert. Any friend of Quinn's is a friend of ours. My wife Martha runs the hotel next door. You'll find a soft bed and good cooking there. That evening, under the warm glow of lantern light, Josephine ate her first proper meal in weeks. Martha fussed over her, making sure she had seconds of stew and a slice of fresh apple pie. You poor thing, Martha said kindly. Word's been spreading about that stagecoach robbery. Terrible business. They say no one survived. Josephine's spoon trembled. I suppose I'm the exception. Martha gasped. You were on that coach? Quinn stepped in quickly. She was. And she's been through enough, so let's let her rest. Martha nodded, sympathy filling her eyes. Of course, dear. You're safe here now. That's all that matters. But as Josephine lay awake later that night, she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching her. The sound of horses passing outside made her heart race, and she clutched her mother's silver locket for comfort. By morning, Quinn was waiting downstairs. You sleep? He asked. Some, she admitted, though I kept thinking about those men. What if they come here? Then they'll answer to me, Quinn said simply. Over breakfast, Samuel joined them. Quinn tells me you're a teacher, he said. Juniper Creek could sure use one. Our children need learning, and the church has a spare room that could be turned into a classroom. Josephine hesitated, glancing at Quinn. His eyes were hopeful. I'd like that, she said finally. It would be nice to belong somewhere again. That afternoon, word spread quickly through town. A new schoolteacher had arrived. Mothers stopped by to introduce themselves. Children peeked through the windows, whispering curiously about the lady from the east. For the first time in months, Josephine smiled without fear. Days passed, then weeks. Quinn stayed nearby, helping her settle in and making sure she felt safe. Their friendship deepened, growing into something quiet but unshakable. He brought her small gifts. Fresh wildflowers, books, or carved wooden letters for her students. On the night of the town's welcoming dance, Quinn appeared at the door of the Millers' hotel, freshly shaven and wearing a clean vest. May I escort you, Miss Lambert? Josephine blushed. You may, Mr. Thornton. The town hall glowed with lamplight and laughter. Fiddles played, boots stomped, and the smell of sweet cider filled the air. When Quinn led Josephine onto the dance floor, the world seemed to slow. She laughed for the first time in months, the sound blending with the music. "You look happy," Quinn said, smiling down at her. "I am," she replied. "You've given me that." They danced until the night cooled, then slipped outside beneath the stars. The air was still, the sky endless above them. "Josephine," Quinn began softly, "I know it's soon, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel what I do." He took her hands, rough fingers trembling slightly. "You've turned this lonely life of mine into something worth living for. I'd be honored if you'd let me court you properly." Tears filled Josephine's eyes. "You already have, Quinn Thornton. You just didn't ask until now." He smiled, relief and joy mixing in his eyes as he drew her close. Their kiss was gentle, certain, a promise whispered under the Arizona stars. But their peace didn't last. 2 days later, as Quinn and Josephine rode out to his ranch to check the cattle, they saw a group of riders on the ridge. 3 of them. One wore a red bandana. Quinn's entire body tensed. "Stay behind me," he said, drawing his pistol. The riders approached slowly, the leader's cruel smile visible even from a distance. "Well, well," he called out, "the schoolteacher and her hero. Been a long ride tracking you down." Josephine's heart froze. "Quinn, it's them." "Stay calm," Quinn whispered. "Whatever they want, they won't get it." The men reined their horses to a stop a few yards away. The leader held up a folded piece of paper. "This look familiar, Miss Lambert. We found it with your things at the wreck. Seems to be addressed to you. Talks about a document you agreed to carry to Prescott." Josephine frowned, confused. "I never agreed to carry anything." "Funny," the man sneered. "Because my boss says you've got something that belongs to him, and he'll kill to get it back." Quinn stepped forward, his voice low and cold. "You've said enough. Turn around and ride out while you still can." The leader's smile vanished. "Wrong answer." The crack of gunfire shattered the silence. Quinn shoved Josephine toward the rocks, drawing his rifle in one swift motion. The gunfight erupted, echoes bouncing off the hills. Dust, smoke, and shouting filled the air. Josephine ducked behind a boulder, clutching her small pistol. She could hear Quinn's steady shots, each one deliberate, deadly. 2 of the attackers went down. The third turned to flee, but Quinn's bullet struck his shoulder, spinning him from his horse. The leader, bleeding but alive, crawled behind a fallen log, firing wildly. Josephine saw him reload and aim straight for Quinn's back. Without thinking, she stood and fired her derringer. The tiny gun kicked hard in her hand, but her shot found its mark. The man fell still. The sudden silence was deafening. Only the wind whispered through the grass. Quinn ran to her, grabbing her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, but it's over, isn't it?" Quote. He glanced at the fallen men, his jaw set. "It's over for them, but we still need answers." Among the leader's belongings, Quinn found the same letter the man had shown them, along with Josephine's mother's locket. She opened it, hands trembling, and gasped. Inside, hidden behind a false panel, was a folded paper covered in seals and signatures. "It's a deed," Quinn said, scanning it. "Proof the Silver Crescent Mining Company's been stealing land." Josephine stared at him in disbelief. "So that's what they were after all this time." "And now we've got it," Quinn said. "We'll take it to the judge in Prescott. Let the law handle the rest." Quote. 2 weeks later, after delivering the document and testifying before the court, the Silver Crescent gang was arrested and the stolen lands returned to their rightful owners. Judge Harrison had looked at them both with approval. "You two have done this territory a service," he'd said. "If you ever tire of ranching, Mr. Thornton, I could use men like you." Quinn had only smiled. "I've got a different future in mind, Your Honor." That future began a week later, back in Juniper Creek, when Quinn stood beside Josephine at the small church altar. She wore a simple white dress. He wore his best coat. The town gathered to celebrate as they spoke their vows, sealing their love in front of the same people who had once been strangers. As the bells rang, Quinn lifted her hand to his lips. "You ready to go home, Mrs. Thornton?" Josephine smiled through happy tears. "I already am, Mr. Thornton." When they returned to the ranch, the sun was setting, just as it had the day they met. The half-built barn stood tall against the horizon, and the orchard Quinn had dreamed of was planted in neat rows, saplings reaching toward the sky. He lifted her from the horse and carried her across the threshold, setting her down gently by the fire. "This time," Josephine whispered, her arms around his neck, "I'm not running anymore." Quinn smiled, his voice soft and sure. "You don't ever have to." And as they kissed in the quiet glow of the evening, the desert wind carried the promise of a new beginning, one built from courage, forgiveness, and love that had survived the wildest storms of the West. Years later, when their children asked how their parents had met, Josephine would smile and glance at her husband before saying, "Your father found me passed out near the barn door, and he gave me a new life."